Hello and welcome to Liverpool Community Radio. My name is Ben Osu and I'm here to present today's show with D Street Media, which is called Mindful Changes 100 Years of Mental Health. I'd now like to invite D Street Media's directors, Patsy and Sue. So, Sue, can you tell us a little bit about your organisation?
Hi, Ben. Yeah, we're a film and media company who work in the community for the community, giving people a platform to air their views and concerns, and we tackle lots of issue-based subjects like the welfare reform, bedroom tax, antisocial behaviour, bullying, drug abuse, gang culture, self-harm, and the much taboo subject of suicide.
Quite a lot of our work's with young people. We deliver a project called Script to Screen, where we bring together a group of young people and train them in all aspects of film and performance. And when the film's completed, we take it into the community as part of an educational package, which includes a live performance. And we employ some of the young people to take part in this.
Now, funding is always an area of contention, so how are you funded as D Street Media?
Well, we've been really lucky with our funding. In the past, we've been funded by the National Lottery for several of our Script to Screen projects that Patty's just mentioned. We've had various pots of funding from local housing associations, Your Housing, Plus Dane, Cobalt, LHT, LMH. We've also had Community First funding, and we've had pots of funding from the Community Foundation for Merseyside. And also, we've had funding from the Blackburn Arms pub, which is always
Lovely.
good.
Yeah, nice place. So tell us a bit about this project. Why mental health and why 100 years of mental health?
Well, this project, 100 Years of Mental Health, it was actually funded by the Heritage Lottery Scheme. And what we did was we invited the whole community to take part, young and old, to tell their stories of mental health, the way they were treated and the treatments that they received throughout the years. We also asked for volunteers who were interested in training with Liverpool Community Radio.
Yeah, this part of the project, we wanted to invite people who were interested in being trained in the technical side of things. So we got a group of people together and they were taught interviewing techniques, how to use radio equipment and the editing suite. And they also helped to create a website to host podcasts and also to put additional information from the project onto.
Well, throughout the project we had with us the volunteers from Wirral Mind, the Samaritans and local historians, and people who previously worked in mental health institutions who give us help and advice.
So you started the project by going out onto the streets of Liverpool to gather the views of local people in the general public, so we're just going to take a listen to these now.
Do you know anybody who suffers from depression?
I do, but it hasn't been a good experience with them. There's different things with mental health issues, isn't there?
Yeah. Different treatments.
Yeah, there is, but there's also different ways of how you look at it, and I can understand looking at it from it's an illness, isn't it?
Yeah.
But there's people who can play on the illness as well. The way I'm thinking is we've had a bad experience with someone with playing on a mental illness, so that's how it's affected us. So I'm looking at it from a different point of view, from I think where you're coming from.
This is why we're asking. It's
any point of view, really.
You know, because it wasn't really a nice experience. But on the other hand, I can see, mental health, we do know, don't we, Becky? Because we've even got family and things like that. So I don't know.
Do you think mental health seems to be more highlighted these days than it was years ago?
There's more of it these days.
And why do you think?
It's just what goes on.
It's more common, isn't it?
Why do you think it's more common? What do you think is causing?
It's just what goes on. You hear of a lot. It's even it's just more in the public eye as well, isn't it? What goes on these days with
and like stuff advertising on the telly about it.
Yeah,
isn't it? So people
there's a lot of
about it.
Things that are happening as well these days with disputes or you know, the physical side as well, when there's aggression and stuff as well, you know. So there's different ways of looking at it, isn't there?
Yeah. That's brilliant. Thanks very
thank
much.
you.
So what springs to your mind when we say mental health?
It's a physical condition that a lot of people suffer with through many things: stress, worry, etc, etc.
And do you think people get enough support?
Well, everybody tries their best, but I suppose there still could be more done, but the way things are, it's so hard today, isn't it?
That's brilliant.
Okay,
Thank you
love.
so much. When you think of mental health, what springs to mind?
Well, mental health, I think when people find it hard to cope, it could happen to anyone, couldn't it? So anyone could just find themselves with a mental condition brought on by stresses.
Well, they
And
do
coping,
say 1 in
yeah.
3 people suffer from some
Yeah,
kind
so
of
anyone could
mental
have-
health problem.
Anybody can suffer mental health problems. So,
Do you know anybody yourself who suffers from mental health problems?
I do,
Anyone in the family
I
or...
do, yeah, but I would rather not say who.
Oh, that's fair
it. No,
enough.
not
Yeah,
you. We're not
yeah,
asking
yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Do you think
Yeah.
people are given the right treatment, the best help, like, or could there be more done?
Could be more done, not really, no. You don't really get much help, like,
Don't you?
no,
Don't
you just get pushed from pillar to post, don't you, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you could do it more help. Yeah.
Could do with more help.
Yeah.
That's brilliant,
that's
Wally.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
All right. Okay.
Cheers now. And we just wanted to ask you, what springs into your mind when you think about mental health?
Someone who's had a breakdown.
Yeah.
Do you know anybody who suffers from mental health?
I've got a relation who's mentally handicapped. I know a lot about all these autism and things like that because my son's in university at the moment and that's what he wants to do. He wants to teach primary school mental health and knowing all that. And he's just submitted one of his dissertations and they've asked him can they publish it because it's that good. Yeah.
I suppose we could do it talking to him.
Yeah, you
Really?
could.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Honest to God.
Smashing that.
Yeah.
Is he in Liverpool University?
He's in Hope University.
Is he? Yeah.
He graduates this year. Yeah.
Oh, that's
So has he studied a lot of mental health problems
Yeah.
and that?
Done like all autism, autistic, ADHD, and all things like that.
Yeah.
Because he wants to be a primary teacher, but for special needs and all that.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
Must be very proud of
I
him.
am very, very proud of him.
Yeah, fantastic young man. Lovely. Oh, thanks very
All
much.
right,
That's
no problem.
brilliant.
All right.
Thank you.
Do you know anybody who suffers from depression?
I do, but it hasn't been a good experience with them. There's different things with mental health issues, isn't there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Different
So, but-
treatments.
yeah, there is, but there's also different ways of how you look at it, and I can understand looking at it from it's an illness, isn't it?
Yeah.
But there's people who can play on the illness as well. The way I'm thinking is we've had a bad experience with someone with playing on a mental illness, so that's how it's affected us. So I'm looking at it from a different point of view.
Do you think mental health seems to be more highlighted these days than it was years ago?
There's more of it these
More of
days.
it.
Like,
And
these
why do you
days.
think?
It's just what goes on.
It's more
around
common, isn't it?
Why
is
do you
more
think
common.
it's more common? What do you think is
It's just what
causing?
goes on. You hear of a lot. It's even it's just more in the public eye as well, isn't it? What goes on these days?
Doing a project about mental health.
Yeah.
And we just wanted to ask you, if we said to you mental health, what springs to your mind?
Well, depression. Yeah. Depression.
Anything else?
Do you know anybody who suffers from depression? Or
Right.
does she get the right treatment? What do you
Well,
think?
she's had it for 50 years. She's on all sorts of tablets.
And do you get enough support from doctors?
Well, she's been on like a number of tablets since 1963, and now she's been diagnosed with mild dementia now.
Right.
So do you think she's been treated well by the National... You know what was
Yeah,
like
well, we
years
got in
ago
touch.
to now?
Mosley Hill got in touch with us,
Yeah.
and we could take up more things if we want, but we don't. This has only happened 6 months ago. So.
Oh, so that's a new thing. You've been offered things
Yeah,
in the
by
last 6
Mosley Hill.
months.
We can get in touch with them any time we want them to come out. Can't complain about that.
Oh, yeah. Oh, thanks very much for talking
Okay.
to us.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it.
Yeah, I can't complain.
I've got a disabled daughter for starters.
Does she suffer from mental health problems?
Yeah.
Well,
No.
she's had a lot of health troubles and things, you know. She's in a wheelchair,
Yeah.
you know. And
So
she has
you've got your hands
Yeah.
on that, yeah.
But,
Is she getting the right treatment and that, do you think?
Yeah,
Yeah,
she
you think
loves
it's
that.
okay?
Yeah, her carers are great and everything.
Oh, well, that's good.
She loves
Took a while to get it though, didn't it?
Did it?
Ah, yeah, we had a lot of trouble trying to get the things we were entitled to,
Yeah.
which we didn't know about.
No one tells you, do they?
No.
You've got to sort of find out these things yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's only when this thing happens then you find out, oh, I didn't know I could have that, didn't know I could have this, you know.
Well, you should be told.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you for
thanks
your
very
time.
much for your time.
Okay.
Springs into your head.
Dementia, depression.
Well, yeah, you just see it every day in various forms. You can't put a name to it all the time, but you can usually tell there's somebody's.
Have you had experience of it in like the family?
I know, I used to be a carer at one time.
Carer.
And I've seen quite a bit.
Yeah.
I can't put a name to most of them, but you can understand that you do see it.
Yeah.
It's a common thing.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, 1 in 3.
Do you think they're getting enough help?
They're getting enough help, but it may not be the right type. It may not be the right kind of help.
A lot of people don't ask for help though, do they? It's like a lot of people
don't
suffer
admit that
inside.
they're suffering.
It's a stigma attached to it, isn't it? And they don't like asking for help. So it's just
That's
keep
a
it to
really good
themselves.
point, that a lot of people don't ask for help. Yeah. And struggle.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's
Yeah.
brilliant.
Thanks
Thanks very much for your time.
And those were the views of the public from the people of Liverpool. We've got some new guests in the studio with us now. Local historian Veronica Kelly. Hello, Veronica.
Hello.
BAFTA award-winning writer Mr. Arthur Ellison. Hello.
Hi everyone.
Hello. And then we also have the director of Liverpool Community Radio, Mr. Steve Farragher. Hello, Steve.
Hello.
So what did we all think of those interviews or the comments?
I thought they were very good. Actually, what it is, Ben, you can see it's proper people talking and the feelings, isn't it? You can see them actually. And suppose when you've listened to them, you realise a lot more people know people who have had mental issues, and it's surprising because it used to just get swept under the carpet, but now everyone seems to know someone who is suffering from depression or any type of mental issue, and I thought it was really good.
I thought it was really interesting, the guy who said that it was 20 years ago when he was having mental health problems and he was told to talk about it, and he was really pushing that to people, that you need to talk and not bottle things up, you know.
It's very important, that, isn't it? I noticed that most of the comments were really positive about people with mental health. There was only one that was actually said they'd had a bad experience with someone with mental health, and it was a negative vibration you got from them. So I thought that was really good. I thought that was a good sign that people
are getting help.
Yeah,
but I think there was,
it's their attitudes. Their attitudes are better. It was good to know that their attitudes.
There was
were
a
good.
lot of people though who did say that it wasn't easy to access help. They struggled to get help for their family members.
That's one of the things I noticed, was people didn't know what they were entitled to.
Yeah.
And another thing that I noticed was that a few people said that men don't talk about mental health. Why do you think that is?
We find that when we go out to the schools and we talk to the young lads, they don't talk to one another. Like, girls all chat to one another, don't they? As we know, we are gabbers, aren't we? So,
we never stop.
But men seem to hold back and keep it in, and they don't talk as much as women do. So it's all kept in, it's bubbled up inside them.
It's like that thing, people say that men don't go and visit the GP because they don't want to admit to anything. There's nothing wrong with me, I'm a man, I'm macho. And I think it's part of that.
It is.
Do you know what I noticed as well? That nobody mentioned drugs. There's a lot of relationship with drugs and mental health out there at the moment.
Especially with it's the green stuff that the young people are smoking.
Marijuana.
Yeah,
Skunk.
I know. That's
Skunk.
right. Yeah. But none of them mention that people with mental health might be people with problems with drugs.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of, especially young men, going back to the men again, and young boys are smoking skunk, green, whatever you want to call it, and they are developing mental health problems.
Yeah.
And I mean, we research this because we go into schools with mental health projects, and apparently the reason why the skunk is affecting them is because the age that they're smoking this stuff, their brains are still developing.
I think one of the things in those interviews, though, was that there was an element of different sources of mental illness. It's not like there's just one thing.
No.
I think years ago, people just thought people just went mad or were mad, whereas there was people were in all those interviews were all saying there was different factors, and that you're talking about drugs being a factor, but it could be it could be a physical thing like losing your job or getting a divorce or relationships, but it can also be something else. It's not like one thing sends people.
Of course.
Sometimes there can be no reason whatsoever. It can just happen, and you can't find a reason for people developing mental health problems. It can just happen.
Well,
it can happen to anyone.
Yeah.
It's a hard world now, isn't it, for the young people?
Well, I think the other thing about the interviews was that it sort of made people, it showed you people weren't just hiding stuff anymore. It's not as much of a stigma, and people are actually prepared on the street to talk to total strangers about.
Yeah, they were quite open.
Yeah.
They were quite open
and
about it.
Years ago, people used to put people away. You know, you have your relative you put away, and you wouldn't even. I think the royal family had people put away.
That's
didn't
right.
they?
Yeah.
So,
and I think that's because there's a lot of support out there now for mental health, and we actually spoke to Sarah from We're All Mind, so we can actually listen to her interview right now.
We're delighted today to be at We're All Mind with Sarah Hatter, who's going to tell us a little bit about We're All Mind and what they do here.
First and foremost, we're a local mental health charity and we're affiliated to National Mind. So we're a local mind association. And what we do is we develop our services in response to any unmet needs within our community. So it's really looking at the local picture, what people are wanting, anybody in any form of distress, and support them in remaining as mentally well as they can.
Could you tell us what's the main service you offer in this building?
The main service really, well, there's two main services. We have the drop-in downstairs, and that's where people can come along, and anybody who's feeling isolated or who just wants to be with other people, just to come in, either take one of the activities. You have things like walking group, arts and crafts group, we have a cookery club. It's about people coming together, working together, supporting each other. Being in a place where there's no judgment, so people can come into the drop-in centre. It's independent of statutory services. They can come in, sign in, they're not worried about going through any sort of medical assessments, anything like that, and relax in that environment. And for instance, today we've got a course going on in listening skills, developing deeper listening skills, because most people in distress just want to be heard. We're in central Birkenhead, 90 to 92 Chester Street, which is the top of Market Street, a very well-known street. Everyone has mental health needs. So, and at different times we all function better sometimes and don't function so well at others. So when anyone comes in here, if they need help and support, and with carers and supporters, invariably they will have mental health needs that they need, because they're giving so much to other people and they're under so many sort of competing demands. Their own self-care often lacks, and we're all about here focusing on the self, not being selfish, but being self-aware and taking that self-care, and that's our first starting point, valuing yourself, feeling...
Yeah, and I suppose if you are a carer or a supporter of someone who has got mental health issues, you need to stay strong.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You need to stay strong for yourself, for the person who you're supporting, and for the networks around that person. It's carers, they're sort of like this hidden workforce at the moment, and you know, without them I don't know what the country would do, to be honest. You just think about the millions and millions, possibly billions of pounds that they'd have to spend on people's care if they didn't have carers. But not all carers choose to do it. Some carers just find themselves in that position through family connections. Not that they don't want to do it, but they've just found themselves within that role.
There's a lot of young people, isn't there, children actually looking after, caring for parents and that with mental health problems. Do you find that a lot?
We do find that a lot, and there's actually a local organisation, Bernardo's, who used to run groups for children and for parents of children who care for them as well, to help those parents whose children are caring cope with their issues around sort of that guilt that they feel. But unfortunately there are a lot of young people at the moment caring for people with mental health needs or other physical illnesses as well.
And they do say that 1 in 3 of us have got some kind of mental health issue, and yet there's still a huge stigma. Do you still find that in this day and age?
Undoubtedly the stigma there, and traditionally through history mental health has been stigmatised, and so the people within that fall into that group of having mental health problems, which, like you've quite rightly said with the statistics, you say 1 in 3. I think 1 in 4 is bandied about a lot as well, but realistically it's more like 1 in 3. If you think there's sort of 3 of us here sitting together chatting, if it's not me, it's not you, who else is it? So there is no us and them. We could at any point, we don't know what life's going to throw at us, you know, how our experiences are going to change, the everyday challenges of life, plus any traumatic event, which hopefully, you know, we hope not to happen, but it does. There's so many people at any given time experiencing mental health problems. Because of that, I think if people are more knowledgeable and understand that we all have mental health needs and it could affect any of us at any time, and it probably does, but people don't recognise it. We get people struggling and experiencing extreme anxiety or feeling really overwhelmed and sad who are actually depressed, and they don't recognise they've got a mental health problem, actually don't want to accept that they have. The more we understand and know about mental health and accept that it's just the same as physical health, that sometimes we're healthier than others, and that it can affect any of us, the more we can break down and tackle that stigma that is there.
You can't put a plaster on it, so people sort of think, oh no, I can't admit this. It somehow can be seen as a sign of weakness if you admit that you've got mental health issues.
What most people need are mental health problems. Obviously you've got the medical view and the medical side of things. What you can give people, it's common sense really, time, reassurance, practical strategies, a bit of time out maybe, or support around positive people. A lot of people are fearful around mental health, and it's about, look, what would you need if you were in distress? What would mean something to you? Someone making you a hot cup of tea, giving you half an hour really good attention, listening to you non-judgmentally.
Is there any particular signs that, say, a parent would be looking for in a child? Because at the moment we've been hearing about a lot of self-harm in young people. Is there any particular signs that you'd look for, any parent should look for?
We don't deal specifically with children. This charity deals with adults 18 plus. General signs of someone with a mental health problem. You could look for a change in behaviour, knowing what's normal for that person and what's not normal. And I think when you're looking at adolescents and young people, their emotions can change anyway because they're in a stage of transition, aren't they? So it can be very difficult for people because changes in behaviour, they may think, oh, well, that's just their age. But it's important if you notice there's a change, if someone's becoming more withdrawn, not socialising as much, withdrawing, spend lots of time alone in the bedroom. I know with the social media now, people are on that a lot. Obviously there's the physical signs. If they're wearing different types of clothes, it might be they're trying to cover up signs. If they've cut themselves, for instance, they might try and cover that, so they might be wearing long jumpers when it's summer, something that's unusual behaviour.
So where would you signpost a young person?
Well, we tend to work with people, probably like families or carers who come to us who are concerned about a young person, so we wouldn't necessarily come into contact with young people. We would try to encourage them first and foremost to speak to their caregivers or parents, to open up and to let them know. If they didn't want to do that, if they felt that they couldn't, there are certain websites online where you can go and get some help from. I have got those available for you, can have a look for you. The CAMS service, the Child and Adolescent Mental Health Service, is young people might get referred into if they've gone through their GP. If they're in school and they can find one member of staff maybe who they trust, they might have somebody who's a designated member of staff who they speak to with problems, might be a tutor or someone like that. It might not necessarily be, they might not have that good a relationship with that person. Hopefully they would have. The most important thing is they speak to someone they trust, an adult
maybe
that they
a GP
trust.
or someone.
Yeah, the GP. They might not want to go to the GP because they might not want their parents to know. First and foremost, we'd encourage them to share with their families, but we understand that if someone's so distressed and they're resorting to the point where they want to cope through self-harm, they might find it difficult to express that to their parents because they may not understand the reasons why they do. Down the GP route would be a very good starting point for anyone to.
And just to generally not bottling in to talk to someone, like you say, if it's not a teacher, a learning mentor, or
sometimes it can just be disclosing to another friend who you trust, and that friend that might then maybe tell their parents, who might get in touch with school, and as long as it's handled in a sensitive way and the child or the young person doesn't feel betrayed in any way, because that's really important. So it's very important to stress somebody who you trust, someone who you know cares about you.
And you do outreach work here and educational work. Is that do you go into local schools?
We have done, and we do occasionally within our sort of budget allowing. But we always, whenever we go into schools, we feel that the work is so necessary because we liaise with the teachers beforehand before we go in, and they often tell us stories of what's being presented to them, what's been disclosed. A lot of self-harm we hear about all the time, and also students who are presenting who are saying their family members are struggling with mental health problems.
Fantastic work that you do, I've got to say. How are you funded?
All sorts of different funding streams.
Like everybody.
We're constantly sort of having to tender really for funding. We have some council funding from different streams. The training department is funded by the big lottery. We always say as a staff team as well, we're very, very privileged to be doing this work, and when we go home, and I feel incredibly lucky to be working in such an environment and supported by my peers, by the people we work with, people we work in partnership with, and the service users ourselves, to go home and feel better for coming work is great.
Because you care and you're doing a good job.
Going back to before, we were talking about the stigma, because lots of people with mental health problems internalise stigma, and that's historical. I know you've done some work around the history of mental health. We're still sort of living with the fallout from those things that created the stigma, so we're trying to sort of work with that. And the nice thing about here, and I think the thing which is helpful to the service users to come in, is there's no us and them. Just like we say there's no us and them with mental health, it can happen to any of us. We all have mental health needs. When they come here, we don't have staff toilets, we don't have staff uniforms, we don't wear badges. When we have social events, the staff will sit with the service users. When they go on holiday, they'll share accommodation with service users. There is really no us and them. We work closely with programmes that help support people with substance misuse. My personal viewpoint is a bit of a chicken and egg. Sometimes it's quite hard to know, because sometimes people are using substances, alcohol or drugs, to actually as a coping mechanism to deal with their problems, to get through their problems, to suppress their problems, to really detach from reality, everyday living, to knock the edges off the pain that they're experiencing. They then become dependent and fall into the lifestyle and then develop associated problems, and then that will impact on the mental health. And it's a bit of a spiral, because you can get many associated problems like debt, homelessness, loss of employment. It's a bit of a vicious cycle.
You wouldn't know which came first.
No, there are different perspectives. Some people are quite clear-cut. Personally, just from my experience, sometimes it's really hard to tell. And do you know what? It really doesn't matter, because people might be struggling so much with their mental health that they're using substance, or it might be the other way around. Somebody's got a physical dependency on it, and that physical dependency has then resulted in those lifestyle changes which are negative, impacted negatively on the physical or the lifestyle, and then they develop mental health problems. So I see the two as intertwined.
Yeah. So you can develop mental health problems by taking drugs, and at the same time,
well, you reckon it's the green stuff, isn't it now?
Marijuana
with the
because you've got mental health.
Yeah. There is definitely, there's a link. You just look at like the marijuana and things like that with young people as well. There has been research shown that it can definitely trigger mental health episodes in people, and deteriorate mental health, and people. In fact, with young people who are smoking substances or taking substances in any other ways, their mental health invariably will take a dip, and there's lots of research done, and people can be predisposed to mental health problems as well, which may never develop, but then when they've dabbled in drugs, that can trigger them off. But they might have a genetic disposition to it. And also the lifestyle changes. It's not just, it can be the actual drugs that can induce sort of mental health problems, but it can be the associated lifestyle changes that come from taking drugs that can develop mental health problems as well.
That was Sarah from Wirral Mind. What did everyone think about what Sarah had to say?
We've been over to Wirral Mind, myself and Patsy, quite a number of times for advice about projects that we've been doing on mental health. And when you walk in the door of Wirral Mind, you think, I'm going into an organisation that deals with mental health. This will be a bit depressing. It's not a bit like that. It's really upbeat. Everyone's really helpful, and it's just a great place to go into.
They're very genuine, and they really care, don't they, about the people that come to see them. The atmosphere is absolutely amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, they've got a cafe in there, and the staff and the service users integrate in that cafe. They all use the one place, they've just got a brilliant attitude.
Did I hear correct? Do they need funding to keep going?
Yeah.
And that's half the problem, really, isn't it? Because I've been there with you, have nice soup Pats, and it's a great place, isn't it? And so if the funding stops, that's it, isn't it? That's one less place for people with mental issues to go to, isn't it?
Well, that was a question that I was going to ask, actually, was she touched on funding and the cost, and should there actually be a cost placed on people's health, whether it be physical or mental? Or should the support just be there to help them for as long as it's needed? Obviously, there needs to be it needs to be monitored so it's not abused. But should we put a price per head on people for support that they'll need to?
I think there's a bit of a debate, isn't there, in the National Health Service at the moment that people who've got mental health issues don't get treated as well as a physical injury. Do you know what I mean? So it's like it sort of can be. It's felt like it can be ignored. Like you couldn't ignore someone who's got a broken leg, but you can ignore someone who's got a broken mind because they might cure themselves, or they're not making much of a nuisance of themselves.
Yeah, you can't physically see the problem, so it's often ignored. I just think because we've been in there and we've met the staff and we've got to know them, a lot of the staff's time is taken up with doing funding bids. And this is valuable time. They're brilliant with the service users, but they have to come away from that and fill in funding bids.
And then they've got to wait to find out, and then it's like 3 or 4 days to get there, isn't it? It's like is it before they've even find out they're going to get any funding at all, isn't it?
Yeah, it's definitely needed. I don't know what some people would do without them.
Yeah, it would be awful if they ended. They've been going since 1939. They were set up during the war, for people's mental health then. And it was started originally by the grandmother of it. They call it the grandmother of it all. It was Dame Evelyn Fox, and she was the one who set it up. But the actual mind, as it stands now, was the combination of 3 other organisations.
Right. Wirral Mind is slightly separate, but they are affiliated to the main body of Mind.
They all come under that umbrella.
I mean, the lovely people, even on Christmas, they leave their families and they're there in that building giving Christmas dinners out.
And the staff,
They're just, you can tell they really care, can't you? So
absolutely.
And the service users come in and they're just like friends. They treat them like friends. There's no second names or, it's a really lovely place.
Now, that was a shortened version of the interview with Sarah, but you can find out more about that on the D Street Media website, which is d-streetmedia.co.uk. We're going to go into another interview now, which is with someone who volunteered on this project and has worked in mental institutions for over 30 years, and this is a guy called Bob Knowles.
Today we're delighted to be joined by Bob Knowles. Firstly, Bob, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay. Well, professionally, I've worked in a district general hospital, Department of Psychiatry. I've got a qualification in psychology and social work, and I've been into mental health, teaching mental health, positive mental health, at Wirral Mind for about 12 years.
That's a fantastic organisation, Wirral Mind. They do brilliant work.
I've also been through various crises. I've been divorced. I brought up a couple of children on my own for a number of years. And I've had some serious medical conditions, which I'm now recovered from. So I've had lots of life experience as well.
Brilliant. This project is called Mindful Changes, 100 Years of Mental Health. So if you could take us back, because I know that you've done a lot of the history of mental health, if you could take us back to give us some examples maybe of how treatments were 100 years ago.
Okay, well, in mental health, there's always been a tension about what mental health's all about, and that really goes back much further than 100 years. It goes back to the ancient Greeks and earlier. And the debate has always been about whether people's mental health is a spiritual matter, whether it's a physical matter, a medical matter, something to do with doctors and healers, or whether it's an emotional matter, it's to do with the way people feel and the way they live their lives, a kind of social angle. And those three kind of ways of thinking about mental health and dealing with mental health have weaved their way through the centuries. And they were still around at the beginning of the 20th century, unresolved. And indeed, they're still unresolved today. There's still a massive debate. Mental health is an area which people can have very strong feelings about, coming from very different places. And what you see depends on what you're looking for. So if you're a doctor, you'll see one set of explanations and treatments. If you're a counsellor, you'll see another. If you're a service user, you may well see another. So it's quite a complicated mix. And the beginning of the 20th century, there were things going on then. It was a period when a lot of people were still languishing in very large institutions. By and large, treatments were pretty poor, and not many people received any treatments. They were basically incarcerated.
For what? What was happening in their lives? What were their symptoms? What was a common thing to be incarcerated for, put in one of these institutions?
Well, I guess they're exactly the same things that people get put in institutions for today. I remember seeing an admissions book from a Quaker hospital once upon a time, from the mid to late 19th century, and about half of the admissions were written down as unrequited love.
Right.
So in other words, I suppose in modern parlance, it would be people who had been emotionally distressed by relationships and by life. Mm. But if you look at the people who are in the hospitals, the very great majority of them, and were in my opinion simply there because they were poor. Mm-hmm. And the poverty and the grinding pressures of poverty and the pressures that had on relationships and so on led people to experience very severe distress. And in my opinion, an awful lot of people were simply in there because they came from poor backgrounds.
So would you say they were depressed?
Yeah, well, it was called, of course, in those days, it was called melancholia.
Right.
But yeah, certainly they were depressed. We have all the languages change, of course. I've just used two words there for I suppose are the same things, depression and melancholia. But when you think about the way my grandma, for example, would see would talk about being depressed, she'd probably say that she was suffering with her nerves. Mm-hmm. Or something like that. She'd have a different way of describing the same thing. But yeah, I mean, obviously being in poverty and having difficulties would lead anybody to be depressed.
Yeah. So when would you say that people were starting to receive medication for being depressed? What sort of area would that be? Okay. Well, I mean, as I said, there are, if you look at the three areas, and you think about the medical area, which is the area where medicines, developed and came from, then again that goes back to the early Greek times and beyond. Mm-hmm. That human beings have always used whatever they can get their hands on to modify their experience of the world and of themselves. Mm-hmm. So, way back when, right through until relatively recently, people were being medicated with substances that grew in the fields, or could easily be synthesized. So the use of things like opium and various medicines that were derived from opium, like morphine and diamorphine, they were used again for centuries. Marijuana was used medicinally for people with mental health problems. So we have used medicines for a long time. Mm-hmm. I mean, however, your question's right that the 20th century saw a great explosion of the use of medicines, but that really didn't properly come about until the middle of the 20th century. There were medicines used before then, but they were pretty blunt instruments. There were things like the bromides. People have heard of bromides. Anybody that's heard the joke about being in the forces and they put bromide in your tea, and that was supposed to dampen your libido while you were a soldier and you didn't have access to female company. But bromides were actually used just to dampen everything down. Right. Because people were terrified. The First World War and into the Second World War were terrified, quite naturally, of putting themselves in the line of a bullet, which might maim them or kill them. And so an awful lot of the troops were given medicines like bromides to dampen that fear down. Could I just ask you about, we were just talking about soldiers in the war there, when people were in the First World War and they come home suffering from shell shock. Mm-hmm. So what is the meaning of shell shock? What was happening to these men who come back, and how were they treated? Okay, well,
I mean, I think Shell Shock's an interesting one, really, because that sort of reveals what I've in small way what was going on that I was describing before, because psychiatrists at the time really believed that mental illness was a physical matter, and they had when the lads came back from the front with this condition, where they were really shook up. Their emotions were all over the place. They were crying, they were fearful, and very depressed, and so on. The psychiatrists at the time had to try and look for a physical explanation, and they came up with ideas like that it was people's brains being bashed around in their skulls, and so on. However, there was another set of thoughts going on at the same sort of time, and that was sort of led by the psychoanalysts, people like Sigmund Freud, who came up with a set of ideas that said that human distress often had emotional rather than physical origins. Mm-hmm. And that was really it wasn't the first time it had been said, but it came together as a set of ideas at the beginning of the 20th century. And reluctantly, the physical doctors had to agree that the shell shock was an emotional reaction and not a physical reaction. And of course, the word shell shock's interesting, because the symptoms of shell shock were pretty well exactly the same as were ascribed to women in society who had the same symptoms, but it was called hysteria. Mm-hmm. And whether you know, but hysteria, basically, the word histos in Greek means womb. So at the time, it was completely unacceptable for society to say that our boys back from the front, our brave boys, had a female condition. Mm-hmm. So it's just unacceptable. So they had to think of a nice macho word for it, and they came up with shell shock, because that sounds kind of rugged and
macho and manly, doesn't it?
But it's the same thing. Mm-hmm. And people began to see that shell shock was the result of putting people in impossible positions, which they still are put in impossible positions. On the one hand, at war, it was either go over the top and get shot, or refuse to go over the top and get shot.
Anyway.
So it's an impossible position. Women in society were told they had to stay in the kitchen, remain uneducated, and do the bidding of their husbands, which was unacceptable. But to stand up and say, I'm not going to do this anymore, I'm not going to try and get into university, did lead to some women being certified under mental health legislation and placed in asylums, in mental asylums, for wanting to become educated.
Well, the suffragettes fought against that, didn't they? Yeah. If we move on now, so that was the turn of the century up to the First World War. If we move a little bit further on, we found it really interesting in the 50s to see that people were being given treatments for mental health because of their sexuality. And homosexual males were given all kinds of brain treatments. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, it was regarded as a mental illness. It was in the doctor's book of mental illnesses up until the 1970s in this country, and you could treat people for homosexuality against their wishes, and it would be regarded as a mental illness. It's until relatively recently, and the treatments were meted out to boys who were given. I think one of the treatments was aversion therapy. They'd show them pictures of naked men or near naked men and give them electric shock and so on, so that they associated an uncomfortable and unpleasant experience with something that they otherwise would have found quite interesting. So I've been a really, really bad time.
And that was Bob Knowles, who has been a volunteer on the project. And has been working in mental institutions for over 30 years, and you can listen to that interview at d-streetmedia.co.uk. It's great that you got these people volunteering. Do you have many good responses? Or?
Oh, we had a fantastic response when we asked for members of the public to come forward, and lots of people wanted to share their stories and the stories that have gone on in their families. And this is where we enlisted the help of our good friend Arthur Ellison, the writer. And we also Arthur had to choose just 4 of these stories, and you know there was 20 odd people told stories.
Yeah.
So it was quite a job for Arthur, and then we got together some local actors and we turned these stories into short plays, you know.
So Arthur, how did you get it from 20 to 4?
Well, yeah, was it, I think it was more than 20, must be about 22, I think, wasn't there?
Something.
Yeah. And so I had to pick 4. I'm not necessarily maybe I'm a drama writer, not the most dramatic stories, but stories that seem to matter. And a lot of stories, but basically were like the last maybe 20 years, but we realised it's a project about the last 100 years of mental health issues. So we picked like one from like different eras. So there was only 2 from like around about the 1914 to 20 era. So I picked a really good one there. And then there's another one in the 1950s, and then one in the 1970s, and one right up to present date. And they all seem just to click together. But it was hard trying to sort them out, sort 4 really good stories out. And out of 4, I mean, 4 are really good. I think, as a drama writer, the first one, the shell shock one, was really good because you could feel how they were in the war, and the trials they went through. And them days when they come home, it was shell shock, but he was just treating them like. Like, okay, I shouldn't say the word, but they were mad, and it was.
Well, I'm
terrible.
going to stop you there because we can actually play and listen to this.
Can we? Okay,
Shell Shock right now.
Yeah.
So, this is the first of the 4 plays, and it's called Shell Shock.
Jess?
Hiya, Dan. Is everything fine with your grandma?
Yeah. She hates being in that care home life, but it's for the best.
It'll be safer. She's had too many falls lately. Did you clear her house okay?
Yeah. Some of her stuff had been there forever. Mum said she saw ornaments and pictures that she hadn't seen since she was a kid.
Go away.
And look at this. It'll really help me with my research for that magazine spot I'm hoping to get.
What is it?
My mum's granddad's diaries.
Go away.
I've been reading a bit. Do you want to listen to some of it?
Yeah. I've just poured a cuppa. I'll do you one now.
Oh, great. It's about him being in the trenches in the First World War.
Oh, right.
Yeah, then. Harry Forshaw, aged 18, November 23rd in the year 1916. Yesterday was the worst day in the trenches so far. Everything was so loud, it had been raining. There was mud everywhere. German snipers were ready to blow our brains out as soon as they saw a Tommy helmet.
The bombs were raining down on us. I was terrified. I was fighting for king and country, but I was still terrified. I could hear a bomb exploding, not 50 yards from us. Thought I wouldn't live to see another day. Our Sarge was shouting something, but I couldn't hear him. Saw him legging it to Eddie. Saw him check his breathing, but from Sarge's face I knew Eddie was dead. And then just in front of our trench, it hit us. Threw me back, threw everyone back. I mean, I was still conscious, I was alive, but the pain was immense. I only knew later. Shrapnel had pierced my leg. I tried to stand, but I couldn't. Fell to the side, down into a hole caused by one of the bombs. I laid there, out of breath, trying my best not to scream in pain. Then I heard a whisper.
Suffocated. I can't move. I can't breathe. Please, please, you're killing me.
A whisper, which I am sure will haunt me for the rest of my days. And then I blanked out.
Why have you stopped?
That was the last page. His diary's full.
What?
Hang on, there's loads of stuff in this box.
He must have had more diaries.
I hope so.
That one must have been terrible.
Yeah, 3 more. Let's see. 1928, 1917, 1921.
1917?
Let's see what it says. I'm on the way back to England. I'm on the way back
to England. It's the 8th of January 1917. To go back into hospital in England for further tests and recuperation. The last few months have been a blank. Can't really remember anything after that bomb hit us. Feel sorry for the Tommies still out there. Feel I'm one of the lucky ones, really. I know of 2 who are like me who just couldn't go on, losing themselves in the mind. They were shot for malingering and cowardice. But I'm telling you now, they weren't cowards. And neither am I.
And then there's nothing until the 6th of March the same year.
Go on then, carry on.
I woke up screaming. It was every night. I was remembering what had happened. Couldn't forget it. It's the same nightmare every single time. I was afraid to go to sleep. Could try and block it out during the day, you know, nurses and doctors and patients were there to help. When the darkness crept in, it returned. The disorientation, the fear, it all returned to haunt me.
Please, help me. I'm suffocating. I can't move. I can't breathe. Please. Please. You're killing me.
I remembered fully that day. The hospital was there to protect me, but it just made things worse. Just a reminder of the trenches. Must have been how prison must have felt. Same thing over and over again.
I'm suffocating. I can't move. I can't breathe. Please. You're killing me.
I killed that soldier.
Please.
Fell onto him in the hole. Should have tried to get out, but I was in pain. I was too weak. But I know, with certainty, I killed that soldier. I killed him by suffocating him.
Oh, God.
Poor old Daddy.
And what happened then?
Come in. Ah, Corporal Forshaw. Still having the nightmares, I see?
Yes, Doctor.
Most nights?
Every night.
I see. Have you any pain anywhere on your body?
No, Doctor. I just get terrible headaches and have dizzy spells, and sometimes I feel like I'm watching myself outside of my own body. Do you know what I mean?
Well, let's do some tests, shall we? Try and sort these headaches and dizzy spells out. We'll have you back at the front as soon as we can. We need men over there, fighting for their country.
I know that, Doctor, but
Right, no buts. But come with me, please.
They wouldn't let me write anything down in the hospital. I don't know why. Maybe they were scared I'd write something about the treatment they'd gave me for me shell shock. Well, I'm writing about it now, and I don't care if they find out. Because those doctors must have been ordered to get me back, and many other patients, back out to the trenches. They had harsh moral views of our hysteria and nightmares. Tried to shame us, get us to do physical stuff quicker than we could even manage. And also, grit me teeth to think of it. Those doctors inflicted pain on us. Electric shock treatment, it was called.
That sounds terrible. Electric shocks.
There's more.
They passed an electric current through different parts of our bodies, trying to cure our so-called shell shock. No! It hurts!
Oh, come now, Mr. Forshaw. Does it hurt more than being injured in the trenches?
Yes!
So it wasn't that bad in the trenches, was it?
Yes!
So would you rather be here or in the trenches?
Ah!
I asked, would you rather be here or in the trenches?
Idiot!
Like any coward would say when he's been injured.
They thought shell shock was physical, but most of us were suffering in our heads. It was like our minds playing tricks on us. We couldn't help it. It wasn't our fault. We were just casualties of a horrible war. They were going to send me back out there, but the war ended before they did. I hoped to go home, but they kept me in for another 3 years. Thought the treatment had stopped, but it didn't. Finally, they let me out. The nightmares still come, but not as much. I only hope time will erase those terrifying days I endured in the trenches and in the hospital.
And that's it. He writes about going home to his mum and dad, hoping to catch on where he left off.
That's a really sad story.
Isn't it?
But at least he had kids, and he tried to live a normal life.
Yeah. I'm going down the library to dig up more stuff. This story definitely has to be told. I reckon I'll make a great story for that magazine. See you later.
It's a long way to Tipperary. It's a long way to go. It's a long way to Tipperary, to the sweetest girl I know.
Oh, it was very emotional, I thought. Really emotional. I mean, I didn't know anything about, like, the history of the wars and that, but this brought it all on to me, you know. It really sort of educated me into what they went through.
Yeah. Of course, there were many soldiers suffering from this condition and were charged with desertion and cowardice and insubordination at the time. So it wasn't looked on as an illness or anything then. It was thought to be, you know, you were just a coward. And even when they were on the road to recovery, there was some the treatments that they had, like solitary confinement. They were disciplined. They had electric shock treatment. They were shamed and physically re-educated, and they had emotional deprivation. It was all, you know, they were all more like punishments and torture. And this is supposed to treat them and make them feel better. But there was one guy who came along, Arthur Hurst. He realised that, you know, they had a problem, and he helped them by giving. He started occupational therapy. So they were then treated, when they went to him, they were treated as, you know, as patients and
So
he
not
was
like
really quite groundbreaking then,
he
wasn't
was, yes, yeah. He had them working on farms and doing jobs, and then was giving them analysis and therapy sessions as well. So that sort of, you know, opened up the.
So he was the opposite to the doctor that we've just heard in the piece, who literally said, "Pull yourself together, man, and get on with it."
Yeah.
And I suppose, you know, it hasn't gone away. People still get it. It's just called PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder these days, isn't it? So it's still there, and I know some of the soaps have covered it in the past. So again, it's still a big issue for some of our soldiers that are out there now, no matter, you know, how much time has gone by.
And it took a long time for it to be recognised. Even, you know, in modern history, the Iraq War, people had to fight for it to be recognised as a disorder.
My nephew was in the Gulf, and when he came back, he wasn't the same person. You know, he didn't show it, and maybe he was too proud to, but you could see it had really affected him.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, the term shell shock was coined in 1917 by a medical officer called Charles Myers, but it was also known as war neurosis, combat stress, and post-traumatic disorder then. So, you know, that phrase has been around for a long time.
Yeah.
We're going to move on to our next play now, which is called Forbidden, and it's all about being gay in the 1950s.
Now listen, Jack. No foul-mouthed comments. Right, I'll get it now. Now remember what I said.
Mrs. Bell, I'm Sue Watkins from the Liverpool Community magazine.
Yeah, but call me Jolly. Come in, love.
Oh, thanks.
This is my husband, Jack.
Oh, pleased to meet you, Jack.
Mr. Bell.
Right, Mr. Bell.
Oh, don't be horrible, Jack. The girl's only doing her job.
A job on your homosexual brother.
The word's gay now.
Gay meant something else in my day. It meant you were happy.
Oh, take no notice to him, Sue. He lives in the past when men were bigots.
Listen, if you'd rather I come back another day, that's not a problem.
No, I want this story told now. My brother never told his side of the story. And now he's gone. I feel people should know what he went through all those years ago.
Ah, right. Well, if you'd like to start by telling me about Billy's life since, well, you know, from when he actually came out, especially the treatment he received in the late 1950s.
They couldn't cure his gayness.
Now stop it, Jack. You make it sound like Billy had a disease. If you're going to comment like that, I'll do the interview myself.
So what made Billy decide to go for therapy?
His dad forced him to go.
Yeah, Jack's right. My dad wasn't happy with our Billy at the time. And he did. He forced him to go to see someone.
He wasn't right in the head. Billy, I mean, not a dad.
Hush, will ya? That's exactly what they said back then. that he had mental problems. But it wasn't. But they still believed it. They were stupid. Me dad, everyone. And so, because he thought he wasn't right in the head, me dad, well, he took him to go and seek, well, I hate saying the word, help. I must admit, I was also shocked a bit when I found out our Billy was gay. He was only 17.
I think that was the general feeling in those times. Different attitudes.
I used to blame myself when Billy told us me and me friends, we used to dress him up in all our clothes when he was little. Just for the laugh, you know. You understand. But he used to love it.
I always told you it was your fault, Dolly.
Well, yeah, I can understand your fears at the time.
Yeah, but I was really scared when my mum told me what Dad was doing. It wasn't Billy's fault that he felt different than other men.
So can you remember what happened when he went to therapy?
Yeah. Me and my mum cried all the time.
Did your dad have any regrets?
He just went out to the pub. But when he heard about the treatments, I knew he was crying to himself. I heard him more than once.
So I'd like to hear a bit more about the therapy that Billy received, if that's okay.
I can remember it like it was yesterday. Billy came home and locked himself in his room. He never wanted to go back. But Dad thought it was the only way, he said. He'd return to normal and get the demons out of his head. I sat with him one night. He came home in tears and in a lot of pain. And he told me what happened.
Right, Mr. Dixon, sign this.
What is it?
No, just a formality, just something to say that you agree to the therapy your son will be receiving.
I don't want any therapy.
You do, Billy. It's the best thing for you.
But Dad?
Here you are, Doctor.
Thank you. There's no need for you to stay, Mr. Dixon.
Right. Now do as you're told, Billy.
But Dad?
Do as you're told.
My poor brother was terrified.
Right, Billy, your therapy starts now. The sooner we can rid you of this disease, the better.
I haven't got a disease.
Billy, you have got a disease. Nurse, take Billy here down to therapy room 4. I'll be there in a couple of minutes.
Where am I going?
Go with the nurse, please.
Nurse, where are you taking me?
Right, just start your therapy. We're just taking you to start your therapy now.
What is it?
Don't be scared, Billy. There's lots of men like you in here.
Like me?
Yes, Billy. Homosexuals.
They took him to a room. He said there was nothing in there, just 2 chairs and a table. The nurse told him to undress down to his underpants and vest. They never gave him a gown or anything. He had to sit there in just his underwear.
He didn't have a clue what to expect, did he?
Not in a million years. Then the doctor came in and placed about 100 photographs on the table. And then that's where everything started.
Look at these photographs, Billy.
What are they?
Some of men and some of women.
They're all in the nude.
Yes, look at this one. A woman. Do you like it?
It's okay.
And this. Big breasts.
I don't know.
Stand up. And these 2 women.
They're okay.
Keep looking. Right. And now this one. That man. He has nice muscles, doesn't he, Billy? How about this photo? 2 naked kissing. Do you like this? I think you like this one better, Billy, don't you?
Can I sit down?
No. Keep looking at the men. Thank you, nurse. Are Fred and Tom outside?
Yes, doctor.
And bring them in, please. Okay, Billy, you can sit down now.
Who are these?
Hold him down, please.
What are you doing? Get off me!
Don't resist, Billy. You'll only make things worse. Attach the electrodes to his penis, please, nurse.
No!
It makes me sick to even think about it.
It reminds me of that film, A Clockwork Orange.
That was a horrible film.
How long did Billy attend the therapy sessions?
3 months.
3 months?
Yeah. He was given electric shock treatment for 2 months. And when that didn't work, they gave him some type of drugs to make him vomit. One day they even brought a man in who exposed himself to Billy. Aversion therapy, I think they called it. But none of it could changed Billy from what he was, and they knew it. And when the doctors found out they were a very religious family, they brought the priest to our home.
A priest?
Yeah, he came to our house every day. The doctor at the hospital had a meeting with him and convinced Father Maguire that my brother was past the point of no return.
Father Maguire?
Yes, Billy, let's go through. Do you mind if I sit down?
No.
Would you pour me a tot of your father's whiskey?
Yeah. My mum and dad are out, and my sister too.
I know they are, Billy. I thought I'd have a little chat with you.
I've got to go out.
No, you haven't, Billy. The hospital said you never responded to the therapy they administered.
I don't think so.
I know so. Don't you think it's wrong, Billy?
What?
Liking men instead of women. Don't you want kids, Billy? Don't you want your mum and dad to be proud of you?
Yeah?
But they're not, are they? They're ashamed of you, Billy. They have to hang their heads when they go to the pub or the shops, all because you don't like women.
I do like women.
But you don't want to sleep with them, do you? You don't want to feel a woman's flesh, do you? You want to feel a man's flesh. You're following the devil by being homosexual, Billy. Do you know that?
But I go to church.
Yes, and God frowns on you. He knows all homosexuals are the devil's disciples.
But I'm not.
Oh, yes, you are. You're damned. Every bone in your body has been sucked dry by evil. You smell of evil, Billy. The stench is profound.
But I'm not evil.
And unless you stop being homosexual, Billy, God will never let you through the gates of heaven. And because you are a sinner, you are not welcome in my church anymore, Billy.
But what about forgiving sin?
Oh, yes, we can always forgive sin, Billy. But why should God let you cast your wicked ways in a holy place of worship and let the devil move about people that are good and pure? Good and pure, Billy. Not homosexual!
That priest really scared our Billy, and he never went to church again.
That's an incredible story.
Yeah, and you know what happened to Father Maguire? It was proven that he'd molested many boys, many of his altar boys.
Oh, that is terrible. What a hypocrite.
Yeah.
And so what eventually happened to Billy then?
He left home. He knew Dad would never understand, and he only visited when he knew he was at work. They never ever spoke again.
Oh, that's so sad.
Yeah. But Billy enjoyed his life, and when they made everything legal in the 1960s, he was over the moon.
Oh, I bet he was.
Me, me mum and his partner, Colin was his name. He was a lovely man. And you know what? When Billy died, Colin did a tribute for him in the cemetery, and it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever heard. I cried at the words. He really loved our Billy, and our Billy really loved him.
Oh, I bet you they did.
Oh, they did.
Listen, thanks very much for the story, Dolly, and thanks, Mr. Bell.
You know what, love? You seem like a nice girl. If we meet anywhere, you can call me Jack.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Jack. Right, I'll be off now. I'll let you have a look at what I've written before anyone else does, okay?
Oh, thanks very much, love.
Oh, okay. Bye, Dolly.
Bye, Sue.
See you, love.
See you, Jack.
I'll see you out.
Okie doke, so what did everyone think about Forbidden?
Well, when you think about the way gay people, are we still allowed to say homosexual? The way they were days. That's what they call them days, weren't they?
And other things amongst
that. Yeah, of course,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you know, but it's horrific when you think how they were trying to turn them, like, in their own mind, the doctors there, turn them back so they were straight. It's just
the very thought of people's sexuality being put together with mental health, it just doesn't make any sense.
No, it doesn't, no.
No, in fact, Freud didn't believe that sexuality, homosexuality, was anything to do with mental health. But he said it was just a sort of normal development of people. There was one woman who wrote to him about her son, and he wrote back saying, homosexuality is assuredly no advantage, but it's nothing to be ashamed of. No vice, no degradation. It cannot be classified as an illness. and we consider it to be a variation of sexual function.
Mm-hmm.
So
what happened there?
That's a
What era
psychiatrist.
was that then?
Well, that was around about, I think, 1920s.
So he wasn't listened to then,
he
was he?
wasn't. No.
Now we obviously
there's a lot.
Sorry, we don't have those treatments and those kind of I use inverted commas when I say this, those medical kind of practices anymore. But do we still think that attitudes are the same towards homosexuality, or do we think they've
I
they've
don't
changed?
think so.
I think we've moved on.
Thankfully, we've moved on.
It has, but if you look at what happened in America recently when the legalisation of marriages took place, there was a big sort of right-wing religious backlash against it. And also, even in this city, there's been occasions where certain churches have been advertising courses to straighten people out who are gay.
No.
Yeah. Not 2 miles away from where we are now.
Yeah. And it's coming up to Pride as well in Liverpool. I think it's the 1st of August.
Mm-hmm.
And every time you do that Pride march, you always get that group of church people outside the courts shouting their kind of abominations for the way that gay people are, or the way that gay people live. So I don't know. I personally think it has obviously moved on, but
I think it is a small minority.
There's
now.
always going to be that in life, isn't there? There's always somebody.
It's not perfect, but it's definitely improved.
Oh, it's definitely improved.
Mm-hmm.
Moving on to our next play, which is Dave's Story.
Being part of a big family from Kirkdale, 8 of us including my mum and dad, you'd have thought I'd have been an exuberant kid, with so many brothers and sisters, but I wasn't. I became quite withdrawn as I approached my teens, and they were soon to become very dark days for me, very bleak times. You see, I was always unsure of myself, never felt to fit in anywhere with anybody. I went out of my way to keep in with the crowd, but as things happened, I stole from a couple of shops, which brought shame on my family. This made an impact on my school life. I thought people were watching me, and also with the fear of not being as clever as most of the kids at my school, I tended to skip school during my last year there, and most days I'd into Liverpool to walk around the city centre, and then I'd have to go home and pretend to my mum and dad I'd been to school.
It's a nice pork chop, that, Betty. So how was school today, David?
Great, Dad.
Come on then. What did you learn today?
Logarithms, Dad.
Oh, well, keep that to yourself. You know I'm not good at that type of stuff.
Thinking back, I must have been a bit clever, because I knew he couldn't understand logarithms or algebra or anything like that. That's why I always said it. He was okay, me dad. I hated lying, but it was better than being afraid of mixing in at school. But I knew I still had to try and integrate, even though I found it really hard. But I pushed myself. And then before I knew it, I got an apprenticeship as a design draftsman, met a girl and was married. And I was still only 18 years of age. It's only later I could admit to myself that with my need to fit in and feel secure, I'd have married anybody. My dad knew that.
I just can't see why you have to marry so young, David, lad.
Because I love her, Dad.
No, you don't. I can see behind those eyes of yours. You still need to feel secure.
I will be secure.
You won't, you know. You'll struggle, me lad. Try and start a family on an apprentice wage. It's ridiculous.
And he was right. We have 2 kids, both girls, one pretty well after the other, and it was a struggle financially and mentally. So I decided to leave my apprenticeship and worked in different jobs in the city centre for a while. Not being able to afford to buy a house and living in different flats, and of course the strain of trying to raise a family started taking its toll. And what didn't help was that my wife was constantly in her mother's. She and the kids were hardly ever at home, and I started resenting the fact that she would rather be with her mother than me. Eventually the marriage broke up. I was 22, still really only very young, and had a lot of irrational thinking going on in my head. I'd always been insecure, but after the breakup, I started really needing approval all the time, to be accepted by other people. I was invoking a tremendous amount of anxiety in myself, feeling distressed and emotionally disturbed. My dad persuaded me to go and see my doctor.
Listen, son, your mum is really worried about you. as I am. I just think you should go and see the doctor.
What can he do?
He might give you something, maybe tablets or a bottle of medicine.
Yeah, but will that help how I feel up here, Dad, in my head?
Well, it's worth a try, isn't it? Listen, I'm off to work now. Tell you what, I'll call away and book an appointment.
Thanks, Dad. The doctor gave me Librium, which didn't really help, and then it progressed to Valium, but it was the constant desire to see me kids that was the problem. Such a painful time. So I went to see my wife. We still weren't divorced by then, and I was praying for reconciliation with my family. But she gave me an ultimatum. She said if that's what I wanted, I should buy a house in the same street as her mother, and things might get better between us. But I didn't want that. I didn't want to have to face her mum every day. We finally got divorced. I turned to drinking. A few pints at first, but then I was out in it. I was in the pub every single night. My dad got a grip of me.
David, you're going to kill yourself, son.
I'm fine, Dad.
You're not? Look at yourself.
I'm only having a couple of pints.
Well, Tommy Mac said he had to pick up from the gutter a couple of nights ago and help you home.
One too many, that's all.
Listen, the family's worried about you. And we've all agreed there's only one thing best for you.
And what's that?
That you stop seeing the kids.
My kids?
Yeah. It's been so close and that's sent you... It's sent you round the bend.
I can't do that.
It's the only way. Because honestly, son, things just won't get better until you do.
So I took his advice, even though it hurt so much. I went and lived in London, hoping my problems, drinking, moping around would eventually disappear. But in reality, I don't suppose it matters where you live if the baggage you've got is inside your head. But I met a girl down there, tried to live a normal life and got married again. Things didn't seem too bad at first, but I kept getting increasingly paranoid about things. My emotions were in turmoil, and I went to the doctors in London around the corner to where I was living. I told the doctor I was living in fear of London, the buses, the tube, near enough everything about the place. Sometimes when I was in work, I was scared to leave the place, and quite often the caretaker would find me asleep on my desk. My wife was very understanding, and she thought a move from the city would benefit us, so we moved to Kent. She and friends of ours thought my problems were down to the way my first marriage broke up and the loss of my kids. One of my wife's friends suggested there could be something wrong with me mentally, but I wouldn't hear of it. I was convinced it was nothing like that. But things did go from bad to worse, and now I was drinking really heavily and crying an awful lot. And although now things were still quite vague, my wife Shirley was like a rock. She took things to hand and went to seek help for me.
Dave, I've been to see the doctor about you.
Right, what did he say?
We think you should go into hospital for a while to let him do a few tests on you.
What kind of tests?
Well, first of all, the doctor thinks you're too dependent on the beer.
He thinks I'm an alcoholic?
Yeah.
Well, do you think I should go to the hospital?
Honestly, love? Yeah.
I remember giving her a big hug. I was thankful that someone was trying to take care of me. And although it seemed the best idea at the time, it was false hopes. I'd become too dependent on drinking. And the psychiatrist I was under at the hospital gave me the advice I probably always wanted but was scared to admit it to myself. He convinced me to go back home to Liverpool and try and sort something out with my ex-wife regarding the kids. But I didn't know how to ask Shirley. I mean, she was born and bred in London. Shirley?
What?
The psychiatrist suggested something that he feels might help me.
Go on.
Would you move back to Liverpool with me?
I'd move to Timbuktu if it means you'll get better.
What Shirley said to me really pulled at my heartstrings. I was back in Liverpool within 6 months, but my ex-wife kept her and the kids distance from me. I started to get the fear back again, and I was still drinking, even more so now. I got the train to work, but my eyes never left the emergency cord, just in case I had to pull it. I just constantly needed to feel safe and secure all the time. I was getting more and more paranoid by the minute. I was back at my old doctor's and he was very supportive and gave me medication but advised me not to drink alcohol with it. But of course, I did. And then the panic attacks began. I'd get them over the slightest thing. So I kept going back into hospital. Why Shirley never left me, I'll never know. But she stayed with me. She was very supportive. Even though I was going through real heavy problems with my ex-wife, Shirley backed me to the hilt. And my ex took me to court over non-payment of maintenance. And I admit I wouldn't pay. And she wouldn't let me see my children. And I became very bitter over that. Me and Shirley drifted around a few flats until we finally settled in Runcorn. But my fears were still there. And I started going hysterical at the slightest thing. I started going to sit in the local hospital. I mean, I wouldn't register in or anything like that, but I just felt so safe there. I had thoughts that if I sat there long enough, I would miraculously get better. I had Shirley at home, but I felt that if anything happened to me, I was in the right place to be cared for.
Dave?
Oh, hiya, Shirley.
You're here again, I see.
I'm just waiting to see the doctor.
No, you're not, Dave. You've been here for 6 hours now.
Oh, he's busy.
Come on, let's go home.
No, Shirley, no.
Please, Dave, there's people staring.
I've got to see the doctor just in case.
Just in case of what?
Well, in case I collapse or suffer a heart attack or something.
I've called your doctor, Dave. He's on his way over to our house now.
Oh, good. Is he going to give me some medication?
He needs to see you, Dave. He just needs to see you.
My doctor had admitted me to Winnick Hospital. I knew what it was. As kids, we called it the loony bin. But in reality, it was a mental institution that cared for people with mental problems. I think this was the first time I actually admitted to myself that my problems were actually mental. And you know what? As a patient there, to me, it was something like a new world. I was getting care and I felt so safe and secure. One of the doctors there, Dr. Brookham, really tried to help me with my problems, but it was to no avail. And in the end, he just left me there taking my medication. I was happy. I never wanted to leave, but at the same time, I did think I was going a bit insane, as there was a lot of insanity from the other patients on a daily basis. And most of them were clearly mentally disturbed. A lot of them were receiving ECT treatment, you know, where they put you in a room and give you an electric shock. Thankfully, I never had it, but I'd hear stories that it was horrible. Shirley visited me every couple of days, and at the time I just expected her to turn up, but it never crossed my mind that she'd have to get 3 buses there. Some of my family, a couple of sisters and my brother turned up. My dad had died by now, my mum wasn't in a fit state to travel, but they just didn't know what to say to me. I was in there for 7 years on and off. They kept letting me out, but I'd just go to the pub and then plead to be let back into my ward. And although there'd been some terrible tragedies there, I mean suicides and stuff like that, I honestly think Winnick kept me alive. And although I was at my most happiest there, I still cried every day. I just didn't want to die there. Some of the people in there had been patients for 50 years and would never get out. And then the day happened. I'd sneaked out once more to go to the pub from the hospital bed, but the hospital knew what I was constantly up to, and they threw me out. I was hysterical and begged them to let me stay, but they'd had enough. They told Shirley to come and take me home. I can't go home, Shirley, I just can't.
You're going to have to, love. I'll look after you.
But you can't do what they do.
Well, I'll have to try.
I'm scared, Shirley.
I know.
Well, can we go straight to the doctor's?
I've already rang him. He'll be at ours when we get home.
Are you sure? Are you really sure, Shirley?
Yes. Come on, let's go.
You wouldn't lie to me, would you?
I'm not lying, Dave. He'll be there.
Honestly?
Honestly.
Will he have some medicine for me?
He said he will.
Well, let's hurry then. And so we went home. The doctor gave me the once-over and told me to come to his surgery in the morning for a prescription. But having no medication that night was terrible. I can even remember thinking about suicide. But Shirley kept me in her arms all night. And then, the next day, my doctor was very firm with me. He told me he was only going to give me 2 tablets of my medication. I was distraught. I couldn't understand. 2 tablets. I left the doctors with Shirley under a cloud, feeling the worst. But as we left the doctors, Because my mind was elsewhere, I fell down the stone stairs outside and knocked myself out. I was unconscious for 2 days and woke up in Warrington Hospital. I had a big gash across my forehead where I'd fell. But for some strange reason, I didn't take those 2 tablets my doctor had given me. I can remember still feeling the need for comfort and safety, but at this moment in time, the medication didn't seem to matter. I met a lady who had a similar problem one day when I was just sitting in a community centre in Runcorn watching the world go by. And she chatted to me about my problem, and the chat really lifted me. I felt a little bit more sure of myself, as if I'd suddenly realised there were people walking around who had experienced the same sort of problems I had. I still see that lady now, out and about, and I'm so grateful to her taking the time to chat to me that day. I'm not a religious man, but I sometimes feel that what has happened to me since leaving the hospital is of a spiritual nature. I never ever took those 2 tablets, and although I'd go cold turkey quite a lot and still felt the need to run away for comfort, I slowly regained my life. I must admit it was hard sometimes, but the best day of my life was after 2 years of carrying those tablets in my pocket every day. I threw them in the bin. My doctor was surprised how things turned out. He was so pleased with me. He was a rock through my turbulent times, as was my Shirley. It's taken me 30 years to adapt and move on with my life, and I'm grateful to everybody who walked alongside me during that time. I never got to see my kids again. And I still hope one day for a reconciliation with them. One of my kids sent me a rejection letter when I wrote to her, which hurt. I could never have accepted years ago. It would have sent me off my head, as they say now. But I'm okay with life now, and it's great knowing that if you need help, it's out there somewhere. And the longer I've been free of all my problems, the better I've got. And I know now, I'll never go back there.
What did everyone think of Dave's story?
Can I just say, when we actually met Dave and he come in and told his story, it was so heartfelt. He'd really been through the mill. He'd come such a long way, and I just thought he was really brave to tell us his story.
Yeah. He'd lost a lot, hadn't he? His family and his children, really.
It's a very true story, but we actually changed his name on this one. And he was a really, really nice man. He'd been through hell and back.
Okay.
It's strange. He was in Winnock, wasn't he? And Winnock, you know, there's a lot of negative stories about Winnock, but there's also a lot of positive things that came out.
He said Winnock saved his life.
He did. And it was going from Winnock from 1897. You could do 100 years of Winnock, to be honest, because it was 1897 to 1997. That it was there, and it helped such a lot of people. It really did. I know that, and though people say that, you know, they're glad the institutions are gone, I think for some people they would be glad of them institutions. I think some people cannot cope with everyday life, and the institution regulated them and gave them a routine. And I think for some people it's sad that they've gone.
And what was hard, I think, to visualise about Dave was he treated Winnock as his home.
That's right.
It was his home, basically.
He didn't actually want to leave.
No, he was scared to leave, and every time he went out, he had to go back in, and it was just, you could feel for him. You could feel for him. You know, just glad now he's come out the other side, like you say.
He's marvellous now.
But, you know,
I've got to say though, his second wife, the character, she was absolutely fantastic, and she's still with him to this day. You know, and she's been a rock to him.
Okay, and we're going to introduce our final play now, which is called Help.
Right, thank you all very much for coming here today to your first therapy session. As you can see, we've sat you in pairs today, and the reason for that is we just would like you to talk to each other and just try to be as open and honest as you possibly can be today. Right. The session will last for about 20 minutes today, as it's an introductory session. Has anyone got any questions? Okay, right, well, I'll be here right the way through, so if you do have any problems, any questions, just pop your hand up and I'll come straight over. Right? So we'll begin.
I'm Brad.
Olivia.
So what's your story?
I self-harmed.
You mean like you cut yourself?
That's about it, yeah.
So why?
Well, it just seemed to happen. My mum left us to be with a new man about 18 months ago. I got really depressed. I wanted to hurt myself. Made me feel better.
So you just did it?
It was something inside me making me do it. I kept hearing voices in my head pushing me to do it. But when I'd finished and my arms were a mess, I couldn't believe I'd done it to myself. It was like a dream, and it scared me, because I kept thinking somebody else had done it.
Did you take drugs?
No, never. Why are you here?
Because of drugs. I destroyed my family and my girlfriend's family.
I did the same. I just brought misery onto everybody. I couldn't see everyone around me was suffering. I only thought of myself. My granddad had a minor stroke and he had to move in with us. Then my dad lost his job, and with my mum leaving it just heaped loads of stress on us. I felt so sorry for my little sister Abby. She's only 8. She was stuck in the middle of all of this.
Are you two getting on okay?
Yeah, thanks, Helen.
Yeah, but okay.
Brilliant. Carry on.
And when my dad and granddad found out I was self-harming, they blamed each other and were arguing all the time. That made my depression even worse, because I knew it was all down to me.
Same with me. Everything was my own fault. I mean, I've got the best mum and dad in the world, and the best grandma, but...
What happened?
I got into drugs. I let them all down. I overdosed. Really upset me mum and dad.
I thought my mum had left because of me. I was screaming inside. I even tried to break my fingers in the door. My dad realised this was serious and got the doctors out. I had to go into hospital. Kept me in for 4 days.
I did as well, for 3 weeks.
Oh, I forgot to say there's juice on the table and water if you need a little break.
No thanks.
I'm okay.
Right. Well, you seem to be getting on well, so I'll just leave you both to it.
Okay, Helen. Thanks. It was the first time I'd saw my mum and dad together when I was in the hospital. And I cried. And I tried to tell them about the voices. I told them I was scared of the future. I couldn't see anything out there for me, and I felt depressed all the time.
What did they say?
Well, they understood. And you know what? The moment I began, it was like a huge relief swept over me.
That's great, Olivia.
You don't realise you've got mental health problems until you can talk about it and understand.
I hope talking helps me as well.
It will, honestly.
I just got in with a bad gang. They were a bit older than me. They knew all about drugs. There was a constant supply of everything. They were all off it. And I ended up that way too. I loved it all. Couldn't get enough of it. You don't think of the future. You just want to live for now. But the problem was, I had to keep getting more drugs to keep me up. But I was having severe anxiety attacks, and I knew I was having some mental problems, but at the time I just didn't care. I had really bad times.
I know exactly what you mean. Every time I went out it was, look, it's the mental case. It was horrible. I hated them. My dad caught one of them one day, this lad called Dylan, shouting vile things at me, and my dad pushed him over. It was the worst thing he could have done.
My mum and dad were horrified. They had a real go at me. I begged them not to tell me grandma. She'd have collapsed if she'd have found out. My dad was watching me the whole time. He even got me a job on a building site with him, but to be honest, it just made things even worse.
Why?
I had my own cash. So, what do you think I did?
Bought drugs.
Yeah, But then I met a lovely girl, Chloe. She was great. The best girlfriend ever. She used to come to my grandma's with me. Even my grandma loved her. She used to give us cash from her pension to have a night out. She pushed 50 quid in my hand once and smiled. But I just went and let her down. Spent the 50 quid on coke.
Well, that wasn't very nice.
I know. I was starting to become not very nice. It was me that got Chloe into drugs. She'd never taken them before. I think she only did it because I did. And, well, she liked me. Started going to clubs. It was business. Couldn't get enough of it.
Did Chloe go with you?
Sometimes. But I went mostly with the lads. Our dealer, Wes, went big time, so I had to start looking out for ourselves more. Couldn't afford to take her sometimes. Besides, I was having a great laugh with me mates. Life was sound.
Did Chloe still take drugs?
Yeah. She went out with her mates a lot more. Saw me off my head one night with another girl. And there was a big kick-off in the club. And I mean kick-off. Dorman came in, tooled up. You know, batons and stuff. It was scary.
I know what you mean. That Dylan's dad got his mates round. And they battered me dad and granddad.
No. Are they okay?
Well, they are now.
My family will never forgive me for what I done.
I'm sure they will.
No. I got worse and worse as time went on. Started needing the drugs for confidence. I was taking it in work. They said I was a danger to the other workers. And then I lost my job. Soon I was skint.
But I thought your dad was with you.
He got moved to another building site.
How did you get your drugs without any money?
I had to rely on my mates to sort me out, but even they got fed up with me in the end. I was getting paranoid. Started seeing a different me in the mirror. I even thought it was the devil once.
Okay, everyone, just a few more minutes now.
You were really hooked on the stuff, weren't you?
Couldn't do anything about it. My mind wasn't my own.
It gets you, doesn't it? It's just something not working up there. After my dad and granddad got beat up, I went back to self-harming. And in a strange way, I enjoyed punishing myself. But I knew then something just wasn't right.
I knew all the time that it wasn't right. But I didn't really care. I even stole cash off my grandma once.
You didn't?
I hated myself. But you know what? I still didn't care. I knew the drugs I was going to be taking were going to make me feel better. I needed me fix. And then one night, I couldn't get any. But there was crystal meth being passed around. So I got into that.
Crystal meth? That's worse than coke?
I just wanted drugs so much. Gave me power inside. I thought I could do anything. But that night Chloe was looking for me. I hadn't rang her for ages.
Right, everyone, can we start finishing off now, please?
My mum asked the doctors could I have therapy. And they said yeah. And I've been coming here now for 4 weeks. And every time I talk about my problem, I can feel myself getting that little bit better each time. And now I really think I can move on with my life.
So it really has helped then?
Yeah. But also, something else has helped me cope with my illness. Because one day I walked in on our Abby. She was trying to cut her arms with a pair of scissors. Trying to copy me. I was terrified. I knew there and then this wouldn't go on.
You should be proud of yourself.
I am. And you will be too.
Nah. Never. It's too late.
It's never too late. We've shared something great here. I've never been able to speak so much about all this.
Me too.
It's like we've bonded or something. Should we meet for a coffee in town one day?
How can we? We can't get out.
What do you mean?
Well, we all have to stay inside, don't we?
What are you talking about? We all come in voluntarily, don't we? My dad's outside in the car waiting to take me home.
Are you ready, Brad?
I can't leave.
Why not? Is that your dad?
No. He's me prison guard. I've been sectioned.
Sectioned? What do you mean, sectioned?
Locked up.
Who's done this?
The doctors, police. Can't get out until they say I can.
Why? Because you take drugs?
That night I took the crystal meth. Chloe came looking for me after taking all those drugs. Thought I was invincible. Thought I could do anything. Thought I was Superman. I was standing on the edge of the roof, thinking I could rule the world. Chloe must have been terrified. She tried to grab me, stop me from falling off the roof, but I was laughing because I didn't care. I thought it was funny. I remember her face. Face, horrified. Toppled from the edge. Still laughing. Pulled her with me.
No.
She died. And I lived. It's been nice talking to you, Olivia. Will you be here next time?
Yeah.
See you later then. Bye.
You're in a wheelchair?
I'm paralysed, Olivia. I'll never walk again.
Bye.
So what did we make of that?
It's a really, really sad piece, you know. It's happening a lot. We take the full-length version of Help out into schools as part of an educational project, and we ask for feedback of young people. And one of the main things that they talk about is self-harming. You know, it's a really big thing in this city at the moment. There's lots of young people self-harming. It's like there's an epidemic.
We were asking today, weren't we, when we done the show today, and we were asking this school teacher and, you know, what she thinks you should look for, you know, in our young people today. And she said some of them are wearing cardigans in the heat and trying to cover the body as much as they can. So for mothers out there, look out for this sign.
And for any young people, once again, you need to talk about things. Don't bottle things in and talk. We work closely with the Samaritans, and they're open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And you can contact the Samaritans on 0847 909 090. And they're a listening service.
Yeah.
They're fantastic.
And that play obviously brought us up to the kind of modern day issues around mental health. How do you think that mental health issues and the way that it's perceived have changed?
I think we touched on drugs a little bit earlier on, and the male character in the Help piece was having mental health problems that were all brought on by him taking drugs. And he literally got in with the wrong crowd. And, you know, he come from a decent family, a decent home. He started by smoking skunk, green, marijuana, and he did it because of peer pressure.
Yeah.
All his mates were doing it. They were passing a joint around, and he didn't really want to do it. But he smoked this joint, and it was a gateway drug. It led on to him taking coke. In the end, he was on crystal meth. He worked. His dad got him a job because he had an idea that there was, you know, something not quite right about him, so he thought, I'll get him a job on my building site. But every penny he earned was going on drugs. So he was just fighting a losing battle, and he ended up obviously in a terrible state. He ended up falling off a roof, high on drugs, and he's in a wheelchair for the rest of his life, you know. But all his mental health problems were caused through taking drugs. Now, the female character in that piece had never taken a drug in her life, but she was having mental health problems because of personal circumstances. Her parents had split up and she started self-harm, and she was hearing voices in her head. And I think the thing that comes across strongly there is not everyone who takes drugs, not everyone who's got mental health problem is a drug abuser.
Sure.
You know?
Can I just say, Sue, you are younger than me, obviously. But when I was young, we never ever heard of mental health in any shape or form. There was no self-harm, there was no drugs. So things are getting worse.
Wasn't there? Or was it just hidden away?
Well, in my, right through my life, when I was younger, till I was like, what, say, up to 40, I only ever knew one guy who took drugs. One. Who ended up in a mental hospital. And I never heard of anyone self-harming or anything like that. I mean, there's a lot more things now, because I think there's more pressure, isn't there, now on the kids?
No, I think they're talked about more, to be honest. If you go back to the Victorian times, there was all kinds of drugs getting bandied around.
And I think, again, it's that there's a lot more support out there now, and people are encouraged to talk, to talk about it.
It's not as taboo as it was.
It really isn't, no.
Yeah. Maybe so, but I'm just saying, I never heard of anything.
But I've got one question. Obviously, managing any project can bring its own problems and stresses, but listening to these people and to the other people giving their stories, and, you know, writing the plays and listening to them over again and editing them, how did you guys cope with listening to these stories and putting this project together?
I think that a lot of the stories were quite inspiring, you know, and I don't know about you, Patty, but I felt as if we had a duty to tell these stories. These people were brave enough to come into the workshops and talk to us. And, you know, their stories need to be heard. And hopefully there'll be people out there listening to these stories. It may help them. You know, they may decide, no, it's time for me to deal with my own problems, you know, and it might inspire people to go and get help. And hopefully, you know, that
it was very emotional. I mean, just listening to the Vox Pops, what are they called?
Vox Pops.
Vox Pops.
The Vox Trolls.
I've got to say, I was crying then. I was choked listening to some of what some people have to go through. You realise how blessed you are, don't you? You know, if you can get through this life without mental health problems.
I think the main thing to get out of this is, you know, that there's plenty of support out there. So if anyone has been affected by any of the issues discussed in the programme, they can call Samaritans, which is a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week service on 0847 909090, or email Joe, which is jo@samaritans.org, or they can contact Mind on 0151 512 2200, and that's open 9 AM until 6 PM. This has been Mindful Changes, 100 Years of Mental Health, with the lovely D Street Media and Liverpool Community Radio. Thank you very much for listening, and don't forget you can get more information about this project on d-streetmedia.co.uk.
And can I just say thank you very much to the Heritage Lottery Fund for funding this project.
And obviously this whole project is to raise awareness about mental health and to ensure people know where to go for support. So if you have been affected by any of the issues in the programme, you can call Samaritans, which is a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week helpline on 0847 909090, or you can email Joe, which is jo@samaritans.org. Or you can also contact Mind on 0151 512 2200, and that's open from 9 AM until 6 PM. This has been Mindful Changes, 100 Years of Mental Health, with D Street Media and Liverpool Community Radio. And we'd just like to thank the Heritage Lottery for providing the funding for this project, and I hope that you've really enjoyed it. And if you want to find out more information, you can go to d-streetmedia.co.uk.
This is a poem written about Winnick Hospital by Ken Lewis in 1995. Hold beneath the waterline, I lurch in heavy seas. No redemption, no reprieve. I seek my final resting place. Drowning in 100 tears, I speak with dignity and pride. 100 years.